Government of Karnataka, Department of Collegiate Education. Hello, dear students. Myself Khalil, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce. Course BBM, 5th semester, Subject Management. The paper is Business Research Methods. Topic Research Methodology. The subtopic Sample Size Determination. I welcome you all in this session. As you are aware, in the previous lecture, we discussed about types of non-probability sampling and uses of non-probability sampling. In this session, we are going to talk about sample size determination. In that introduction, meaning of sample size, factors affecting the size of the sample, lastly, approaches for determining the size of the sample. Introduction. Dear students, in sampling analysis, the most ticklish question is what should be the size of the sample, or how large or small should be n? If the sample size is too small, it may not serve to achieve the objectives, and if it is too long, we may incur huge cost and waste resources. The sample size should be carefully fixed so that it will be adequate to draw valid and generalized conclusions. The fixation of adequate sample size requires specific information about the problems under investigation in the population under study. The information collected during investigation from samples is to be recorded on pre pre-designed schedule or on questionnaire. The design of questionnaire depends on the objectives and facilities for analysis. Dear students, sample size determination is the technique of electing. Sample size determination is the method of or technique of electing the number of observation to include in a sample. As the general rule, one can say that the sample must be of an optimum size, that is, it should neither be exclusively large nor too small. Technically, the sample size should be large enough to give confidence interval confidence interval of desired width, and as such the size of the sample must be chosen by some logical process before sample is taken from the universe. Dear students, this is about introduction of sample size. What is sample size? In simple terms, sample size refers to the number of members of the population. Number of members of the population included in the sample. Generally, the sample size is denoted by n. In other words, sample size is the number of observation taken from a population. Sample size is the number of observations taken from a population. It is the part of a population. Sample size is the part of the population chosen for a survey or experiment. It is the subset of population selected to make inferences about the population. Dear students, sample size must be adequate to represent the whole population. Large the sample size, more accurate the findings from a study. This is about meaning of sample size. Factors affecting the size of the sample. Size of the sample should be determined by a researcher keeping in view the following points. Means there are some factors which affects the size of the sample while determining the sample size. They are: first one, nature of universe; second one, number of classes proposed; third one, nature of study; fourth one, type of sampling; fifth one, standard of accuracy and acceptable confidence level; sixth one, availability of finance; and seventh one, factors used in sample size calculation; last one, other considerations. These are all the important factors which affect the size of the sample. Dear students, now we will discuss these factors in brief one by one. The first factor is nature of universe. Means universe may be either homogeneous or heterogeneous in nature. If the items of the universe are homogeneous, a small sample can serve the purpose. But if the items are heterogeneous in nature, a large sample would be required. Technically, this can be termed as dispersion factor. In other words, in simple terms, if the population is homogeneous, fewer cases will be enough. Okay. If the population is heterogeneous, large number of cases may be required. This is the first factor. The second factor affecting the size of the sample is number of classes proposed. If many class groups, here class groups means groups and subgroups, are to be formed, a large sample would be required because a small sample might not be able to give a reasonable number of items in each class group. The third factor is nature of study. If items are to be intensively and continuously studied, the sample should be small. If items are to be intensively and continuously studied, some sample should be small. For a general survey, the size of the sample should be large, but a small sample is considered appropriate in technical surveys. In other words, if the sampling method is restricted random sampling, small sample will be enough. In case of simple random sampling, more numbers may be selected to ensure representation of all. In case of cluster sampling, demands more sample while compared to stratified sampling. Dear students, the fourth factor is types of sampling. Sampling technique plays an important significant part in determining the size of the sample. A small random sample is apt to be much superior to a larger but badly selected sample. The fifth factor is standard of accuracy and acceptable. The fifth factor is standard of accuracy and acceptable confidence level. If the standard of accuracy or the level of precision is to be kept high, we shall require a relatively larger sample. For doubling the accuracy, For a fixed significance level, the sample size has to be increased fourfold. If highest degree of accuracy is required, size the sample means size of the sample should be large. The sixth factor is availability of finance. Dear students, in practice, size of the sample depends upon the amount of money available for the study purposes. This factor should be kept in view while determining the size of the sample. For large samples, result in increasing the cost of sampling estimates. The resources available, including time, and are to be considered before determining the size of the sample. See, large sample may be taken if sufficient time and money is available. Okay, if sufficient time and money is available, then a researcher can take a large sample. Otherwise, small sample may be taken. The seventh factor is factors or elements used in sample size calculation. Dear students, sample size is influenced by the factors used for sample size calculation, such as size of population, margin error, confidence level, variability, etc. I will repeat this point once again. Sample size is influenced by the factors used for sample size calculation, such as these factors, such as size of population, margin error, confidence level, variability, etc. See, these are all the elements included in the formula used to calculate the sample size. Okay, students, let us analyze each and every one in brief. I told no, the first one is margin of error. The margin of error is a statistic expressing the amount of random sampling error in the result of a survey. Means how many percentage points your results will be differ from the real population value. And dear students, margin of error decreases when sample size increases. The factor second factor used in sample size calculation is confidence level. The confidence level is the estimated probability that a population estimate lies within a given margin of error. The third element used in sample size calculation is sampling variability. Sampling variability is the extent to which the measures of a sample differ from the measure of the population. The variance and standard deviations are the common measures of the variability. The last element used in calculation of sample size is population size. If the population is finite and known, it can be taken as a factor to the calculate the sample size. Sample size is calculated differently for finite, infinite, known and unknown populations. Dear students, this is about factors used in sample size calculation. The last factor which is affecting the size of the sample is other considerations. Nature of units, size of the population, size of questionnaire, availability of trained investigators, the conditions under which the sample is being conducted, the time availability for completion of the study are a few other considerations to which a researcher must pay attention while selecting the size of the sample. Dear students, this is about factors affecting the size of the sample. A researcher must keep these factors while considering size of the sample. The next concept is approaches for determining the size of the sample. Dear students, there are two alternative approaches for determining the size of the sample. The first approach is to specify the precision of estimation desired and then to determine the sample size necessary to ensure it. And the second approach uses Bayesian statistics to weigh the cost of additional information against the expected value of the additional information. Students, the first approach is capable of giving a mathematical solution and as such is a frequently used technique of determining n. Here n what represents? Size of the sample. See, the limitations of this technique is that is does not analyze the cost of gathering information. The second approach is theoretically optimal, but it is seldom are used because of difficulty involved in measuring the value of information. Okay, dear students, let us discuss the first approach, that is determination of sample size through the approach based on precision rate and confidence level. To begin with, it can be stated that whenever a sample study is made, there arises some sampling error which can be controlled by selecting a sample of adequate size. But a researcher will have to specify the precision that he wants in respect of his estimates concerning the population parameters. For example, a researcher may like to estimate the mean of universe within plus or minus 3 of the true mean with 95% confidence. In this case, we will say that the desired precision is plus or minus 3. That is, if the sample mean is rupees 100, the true value of the mean will be no less than rupees 97 and no more than rupees 103. In other words, all this means that the acceptable error denoted by E, the acceptable error is equal to 3. Dear students, keeping this in view, we can now explain the determination of sample size so that the specified precision is ensured. Sample size when estimating a mean. Dear students, the confidence interval for the universe mean, that is denoted by m, is given by sample mean means x bar plus or minus z standard deviation of population divided by square root of n, where x bar represents sample mean, z represents the value of standard variate at a given confidence level, and it is 1.96 for a 95% confidence level. Here the small n represents size of the sample and standard deviation of p represents standard deviation of the population. Dear students, suppose we have standard deviation of population 48. For our purpose here, if the difference between universe population m, universe population, it is also called as population mean, universe population and sample mean, that is x bar or x, or the acceptable error is to be kept within plus or minus 3 of the sample mean with 95% confidence, then we can express the acceptable error, that is E, as equal to E equals Z standard deviation P divided by square root of n, or now we can substitute the values here. The value of E is means acceptable error is 3, that equals Z value is 1.96, that is 95%, and standard deviation of population in this illustration is 48 divided by square root of n. Hence the n equals 1.96 square multiplied by 48 square divided by 3 square, then you will get 9.834. Approximately the sample size is 10. In a general way, if you want to estimate population mean, means universe mean, in a population with standard deviation of population with an error no greater than acceptable error, by calculating a confidence interval with confidence corresponding to Z, the necessary sample size, that is n, equals as under n equals Z square multiplied by standard deviation square divided by acceptable error square, that is E square. All this is applicable when the population happens to be infinite. Okay, infinite. But in case of finite population, the above stated formula for determining sample size will become like n equals Z square multiplied by n, that is capital N, multiplied by standard deviation of population square and divided by n minus 1 multiplied by E square plus Z square standard deviation of population square. Dear students, this is about a first approach of determination of sample size, that is determination of sample size based on precision rate and confidence level. Okay students, now we will discuss about the second approach of determination of sample size, that is determination of sample size through the approach based on Bayesian statistics. Students, this approach of determining n, that is sample size, utilizes Bayesian statistics and as such is known as Bayesian approach. The procedure for finding the optimal value of n or the sample size under Bayesian approach is as under. First, Find the expected value of sample information, that is EVSI, for every possible n. Next, also work out a reasonably approximated cost of taking a sample of every possible n. Next, compare the expected value of sample information and the cost of sample for every possible n. In other words, work out the expected net gain for every possible n as stated below. For a given sample size, EVSI minus cost of sample, that equals expected net gain. Lastly, from third above the optional sample size, that value of n which maximizes the differences between the EVSI and the cost of sample can be determined. Dear students, the computation of EVSI for every possible n and then comparing the same with the respective cost is often a very cumbersome task and is generally feasible with mechanized or computer help. Hence, this approach, although being theoretically optimal, is rarely used in practice. Dear students, till now in this session we have discussed about sample size determination, introduction, meaning of sample size, factors affecting the size of the sample, and approaches for determining the size of the sample. Now it's a time to conclude this session. The conclusion is, from the above this discussion we can conclude that a sample size determination is the act of choosing the number of observations or replicates to include in a statistical sample. The sample size is an significant feature of any empirical study in which a goal is to make inferences about a population from a sample. In practice, the sample size used in a study is usually determined based on the cost, time, or convenience of collecting the data, and the need for it to offer sufficient statistical power. Dear students, size of the sample should be determined by the researcher, keeping in view the few points like nature of universe, number of classes proposed, nature of study, etc. These are two means, and there are two alternative approaches for determining the size of the sample. They are, uh, one is based on precision rate and confidence level, and another one is based on Bayesian statistics. Students, these are all reference books. You can refer these books for further information about the sample size determination. See, apart from these book references, in this slide I have provided internet reference links also. Kindly make use of these links. Thank you all. Have a nice day.